if this is a document that you're going to need to potentially enforce in the court of law by an attorney, then you probably need to have an attorney write this. You need, at the bare minimum, review it, right? You're going to potentially need to defend this in court. So have an attorney review at the bare minimum, if not write you a quality lease agreement that's going to protect you in many areas. The areas that might kind of outlined are the bare essentials that you're going to need to include in your lease agreement. There's going to be many other areas. And in fact, we'll probably shoot another video and just go over the items that we kind of include in our lease agreement, the areas that you might not necessarily think of that are necessary to include in your lease agreement. For example, renter's insurance. You absolutely need to require renter's insurance. You should have this clause in there that it is required in your lease agreement, so that if you find out that they don't have renter's insurance, you have a leg to stand on and you can enforce it. Smoking. Is smoking allowed in your property? You absolutely need to have this written into your lease agreement, so that if you find out at some point that the tenant's smoking in your property, which is extremely damaging to your property, that you can enforce it and possibly even evict if necessary if you find that your tenant is just completely uncooperative. So, I mean, there are several. That's just a couple that I kind of had. Another one that I find there's a lot of mistakes on when we're, especially, you know what, this is actually the scary part. Even when we're taking on properties from another property management company, one area where they almost always screw up, and Red Door doesn't, by the way, where a lot of management companies screw up is who's responsible for the utilities in the property.
Utility. I was going to say utility. Yep.
Yes, my God, it happens all the time. And to be honest with you, I'm sitting here thinking, because I'm so shocked by it, is I can't recall a time where we brought on a property that's transferring from another property management company where a tenant's responsible for the utilities, that it was actually outlined in the lease. In fact, it said in the lease that the owner was responsible for. I mean, it's just so anyway, utilities, you've got to have it clearly identified who's going to be responsible for the utilities. And of course, lead-based paint disclosures, absolutely essential. If your property was built before 1978, it's required by law to include that in your lease agreement. Again, it's often missed. You're breaking the law. You need to make sure that it's covered in your lease agreement. So aside from that, it's just clearly identify the duties of what you expect from the tenant. And then we're gonna quickly get into the next class here, which is probably one of my favorite. But that's what I got. That's what I've got for you. Attorney written lease agreement. I can't express it enough. If you're taking anything away from this short class,
state specific attorney lease. So I mean, specifically for the state of Indiana, because there are differences for each state. So I would say yes. And one last thing, and I'll leave it at that. But there is a speaking of state specific, there is a lease put out by the Indiana Association of Realtors. You can get it through, if you use a regular agent or a realtor. But that is, I think it's 2 pages. I would say do not use that one. That one is not the best lease I have ever seen in my life. So stay away from that one. Get a state-specific attorney written.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we could go on and on. This is designed to be a short little lesson for you to take the main pillars away from. And I think that concludes our class here, Landlording 101, on executing a lease agreement as part of your leasing property or investment strategy here. So executing the lease agreement. There we